Hey there, future Louisiana notaries. Welcome back to Notarized by Cristy, where we dive deep into the ins and outs of Louisiana notary practice to help you ace that exam. Today, we're talking about a topic that's fundamental to your notary knowledge: obligations and contracts. This is one of the most crucial areas you'll need to master, so let's get started with the basics. Let's begin with understanding what an obligation is according to Louisiana law. An obligation, as defined in Article 1756 of the Louisiana Civil Code, is a legal relationship where one party, the obligor, is bound to render a performance in favor of another, the obligé. This could be anything from paying a debt to delivering goods. Simply put, an obligation is the duty one person has towards another. In the notary world, you'll encounter obligations all the time, especially when dealing with contracts. Obligations can be categorized in a few different ways. Let's break down a couple of the key types. First, let's discuss the differences between heritable obligations and strictly personal obligations. For heritable obligations, these can be transferred to another person, like in the case of inheritance. On the other hand, strictly personal obligations cannot be transferred. For example, if someone is obligated to perform a personal service, that obligation usually can't be passed on to someone else. Another important distinction is between conditional and unconditional obligations. A conditional obligation depends on the occurrence of a certain event before the obligation is due. An example might be an insurance payout that's only due if a certain event happens, like a natural disaster. Unconditional obligations, meanwhile, are effective immediately and aren't tied to any event. Now that we've got obligations down, let's talk contracts. A contract is essentially an agreement by two or more parties to perform or refrain from performing certain actions, but not every agreement is legally enforceable. For a contract to be valid in Louisiana, it must meet certain requirements. According to the Louisiana Civil Code, the key elements of a valid contract are capacity, consent, cause, and object. Let's break those down quickly. Capacity means that the parties entering into the contract must have the legal ability to do so. This means that basically, they need to be of age and of sound mind. Consent requires that all parties agree to the terms without duress, fraud, or mistake. Cause is the reason why the parties are entering into the contract. The cause must be lawful. And finally, the object refers to the subject matter of the contract, and it too must be lawful. The object must also be possible and determined or determinable. Once a contract is formed, it's time to talk about performance. This is just a fancy way of saying that the parties need to fulfill their obligations as outlined in the contract. But what happens if things go wrong? This is where nullity comes into play, such as absolute nullity and relative nullity. If a contract is absolutely null, it's as if it never existed. This usually happens when the contract violates a law or public policy. Relative nullity, on the other hand, might allow the contract to still produce some effects until it's annulled by the court. For instance, a contract entered into by a minor might be relatively null, meaning that it's valid until someone challenges it in court. Understanding these concepts is vital because, as a notary, you'll be the one ensuring that contracts are properly executed and enforceable. Now that we've discussed some basics about obligations and contracts, let's summarize the key takeaways from today's video. Number 1, obligations are the duties one party has towards another, and they come in various types. Number 2, contracts are agreements that are only enforceable if they meet the requirements of capacity, consent, cause, and object. Number 3, performance is crucial for fulfilling contracts, and understanding nullity is essential for recognizing when a contract can't be enforced. I hope this breakdown helps clarify some of the basics of obligations and contracts for your Louisiana Notary Exam. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss an update. Keep studying hard, and remember, you've got this.